Welcome one and all to the first official build video of the Yonda Rivkus, where we get this non-running scooter to run, and it sucked. Literally, there's a vacuum line. There. So for those of you that did not see the official introduction video, this is my contender for the Ruckus. It's a 2007 Honda Ruckus that's been engine swapped already with a Yamaha Riva 180 and is very patinaed, to put it nicely. So let's get right into it. We have day one of the Ruckus build, first official day that is, and we get to finally look at what we have here. So what we have here is a Honda Ruckus. It is very modified and it is very not running, but I think I know exactly why. And the reason is all of this that you see here, the fueling. What I found was it does crank over, so it does actually start to turn the engine, and if you spray a lot of starter fluid into the carb directly, it will actually start, but I don't think it's getting fuel at all. And the reason being is that these lines are pretty old, not ideal. Basically what I have to do is follow this line back and see what the issue is. There could be a lot of things. In fact, I think there are more than one. Number one, the fuel line here is really brittle and just not great. It might be clogged in one of these check valves or even in the fuel pump itself. So that's another item right here. It could even be as far as the gas tank. Previous owner said that it has been sitting for a year plus, and I don't think the gas has been changed since then. It could be a whole multitude of things, but what I'm gonna do is at least pull things back, kind of process of elimination, go from here all the way back through the tank, get everything cleaned up, and definitely replace a lot of this stuff. Oh, that's nasty. There's actually a little bit of fuel coming out of that, so let me just, maybe it's not getting enough vacuum. Let's try something here. Basically what I'm doing is I'm putting my mouth on this and making a vacuum myself. That worked. This thing looks pretty old, so this is going to be replaced anyway. But let's just keep working back. Another reason why I'm replacing this fuel pump is that all the connections are very corroded. Can't even get that line off. Might have to cut it. There you go. Oh, a lot of crusties came with it. Oh, hello. There we go. Let's see, does this just come up? Yep. Hey, look at that, now it's really flowing. Alright, we got the gas tank out and completely drained. Thankfully, there was not that much gas in it, so I didn't have to do too much. What I'm gonna do is get some fuel tank cleaner or fuel tank solution. I think I can pick that up at AutoZone nearby, and with that I'll give it a few flushes and just make sure I get everything out of there, all the gunk that's probably sitting on the bottom of this thing, so that way everything's completely free flowing, and then we'll work backwards from there to get fuel to the carburetor. Alright, we're moving right along. We have the gas tank over to the side there with some solution, so it's getting cleaned out. In the meantime though, I went ahead and ripped out all of the old fuel lines. We're not going to be needing those anymore, and I've ordered replacements as well as a replacement pump. So that's all ordered and on the way. In the meantime, I'm going to focus on the carb and get that cleaned up. So hopefully, once all the fuel lines and the fuel pump come in, I can put everything back together and we'll have a running Ruckus. Day 2. Well, you join me a few days later and here we have them. Old versus new. This is the old setup, just kind of in close detail, and you can just see how corroded everything was. Yes, this was pumping, but honestly, I would want to replace absolutely everything with this fuel system, because if the fuel lines are any indication of how old this thing is, then this is pretty much on its way out. So that's all going away, and we have, look at this. Oh, brand new stuff. This is great. So we have a brand new fuel filter. These things are dirt cheap, like a couple bucks really on Amazon. I'll put all the links to this stuff that I got down below if you're interested. So we have a fuel filter here, some fuel line, clear fuel line, because I want to see to make sure for future reference if it's getting fuel or not. It's really easy to tell with transparent fuel because you'll actually see the liquid going up through the fuel line. And I have a direct replacement vacuum fuel pump. This is from Mikuni, very popular one with GUI 6 builds, so this one gets no different. I think I found this on eBay for like 29 bucks. Now we get to push this stuff aside, put the new stuff in it, and cross our fingers and that this thing starts. All right, so I got everything in here. I haven't trimmed or cut any of the lines yet. I just want to make sure that this is first working, then we'll worry about fitment and all of that. So for now, that's all I care about, is just, is this thing getting fuel? So we have the new pump down here and the new lines with the check valve. And what we're gonna do right now is crank this and see if we start getting fuel up and into this line. So as we crank, this should be getting a vacuum through this black hose right here, and fuel will slowly start to creep up this. It will take a little while to crank and get everything up here. There will be another check valve just like this one up at the top eventually, so that way there's mostly fuel in the line, so I don't have to keep cranking and cranking and cranking every time I need to turn this thing on in order for it to get enough fuel into the carb so that it actually starts running. But at least now we can start to turn this thing on for the first time and just see if there's any fuel coming into this little bit right here.
12 seconds later.
Not seeing anything yet.
20 minutes later.
Cranked it so much the battery died, and I forgot to put the choke on. That probably was needed. What is going on here? Let's think about this logically. So I put fuel in here, in the actual line from the check valve, at least at the bottom here, all the way, so it feeds into the carb directly like a gravity feed. After all that cranking, actually looks like it has not... Oh, I'm dumb. So, as I mentioned earlier, I don't think the floatable was getting any fuel in it because the fuel level in this line pretty much stayed the same no matter how much I was cranking this, and the reason being was because this end right here was still connected down to the check valve, so it wasn't being gravity fed. There's no air to replace the fuel in the line. So I disconnected it and then just lifted it up, and lo and behold, the gravity fed line filled up the float bowl, so now the level is actually down here, so it does have fuel in the float, in the carburetor, so theoretically if everything else is working I should be able to crank this and it'll fire, at least for a little bit, and then I think that's enough for it to get started and get the fuel, the vacuum line going on the pump here, to then see if the check valve that I have here is okay and that it will allow fuel to go through it. Start maybe? Wants to go, but why won't it? I'm killing this battery. I just need to let it sit for a little longer. On the plus side though, I did see a few spurts from this check valve, so I think it's actually going to be okay.
1 eternity later.
There's got to be a vacuum leak or something somewhere. I don't know what though.
2,000 years later.
Oh man, this is so finicky. Oh, come on. I'm gonna kill this battery again. Come on, baby. All right, hold up. Let's skip forward because I'm sure you don't want to see another 20 minutes of me hopelessly cranking this thing and just hearing nothing but rip it, rip it, rip it, rip, which I have heard for over a week now and is probably gonna haunt my dreams for all of eternity. So, let's skip forward to... So in getting from where I was to what you just saw, there was a lot of time and frustration in which I was not really focused on filming, so let me catch you up. A few days ago, I had to step away from this. Clearly there was an issue, actually issues, as we'll find out later on, but I wanted to get a clear head and step away, as well as do some research online to see exactly what can help me get to actually starting this thing. One of the first things that I found, which was super helpful, was a thread for the Yamaha Riva 180. It was incredibly detailed and technical, especially with the carburetor. A lot of people have swapped these out for a PWK style 28mm carb. So I decided to go ahead and find one myself. They're pretty cheap. You can find knockoffs on Amazon for about $30. So I figured no harm, no foul. I also replaced the intake boot and the air filter to just get everything cleaned and freshened up. Everything needs to be refreshed on this bike anyway. And replacing the carb worked. kind of. After I replaced the carb and everything attached to it, it was able to fire up regularly, but I had the same issue that you saw earlier where it was idling so high. Well, actually, it really wasn't idling, it just wanted to go. I had to basically cover the entire intake with my hand to restrict the airflow in order to get it to calm down. Clearly, there was a lot of air going into this, and I had a Band-Aid on it, quite literally. I duct taped up the new air filter that I put on this, about 95% covered, to the point where it was getting so little airflow that when I turned it on, it finally would idle. I figured there was probably an air leak somewhere around there. There are a lot of nipples that attach to the intake on this Yamaha Riva. I made sure that all of those were capped off. It still was idling super high. I took apart the carb. Maybe there was something with the float level or something internally there that I wasn't seeing, and basically just stared at it for the longest time. And then that's when I noticed the throttle was stuck open. It was holding up the slide a little bit, and I'll show you some pictures on the side here, where it was basically like it was trying to start with me already at quarter throttle. So what I had to do was adjust that cable, so I gave it as much slack up at the top here, as well as taking off the adjustment nut on the carburetor to give myself as much slack as possible, and I was able to get the slide to go all the way down as it's supposed to. And it still wouldn't start. However, to that point, I knew clearly it was getting fuel. I could see the fuel going up the fuel line. There was nothing leaking out of the carb, so I knew that there was nothing wrong in the fuel system. So I had to stare at this thing yet again and finally revisited the other two components that are required for starting this, which is compression and spark. So I did my compression test again and was getting plenty of compression. That was perfectly fine. And then I checked spark, so unplugged it and then kept it connected to the ignition coil and just put it on a metal piece on the engine to see if it sparked while I cranked the engine, and it was fouled. So with a quick trip to AutoZone, we got a new spark plug, and finally, the Rivkus lives. And next time, we're gonna take this on its maiden voyage, and without spoiling too much, its terrifying death trap. Thanks for watching.